Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And it's time for another daily dose of Dismal Disney. We're going to talk about another lawsuit, a copyright lawsuit against Disney, this time over Moana. Apparently Moana was lifted from another concept that was pitched.
From another animator. Now, look, I mean, Disney probably gets all kinds of lawsuits by people claiming that they, had something that Disney took before. I can tell you for a fact that in their contracts, you have to pretty much agree that if there's any similarities, it's completely coincidental, even though you gave them everything, and it was never intended that you're supposed to just let them have it.
Yeah.
I can tell you that for sure. But I also know people will chase things. This case, I think the guy has a case because he tried to go after him for the first Moana movie, but the statute was up, apparently. But the judge thought there was enough merit to allow the second copyright lawsuit to go through. So they're going to be looking at this, and we're going to talk about it here.
Yeah, so before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. Guys, you'll get a woohoo if you do.
Woohoo!
Go out to clownfishminus.com, help support the reef, get exclusive content. We got merchandise out there, all kinds of stuff you guys can buy, and thank you so much for the support. So this is yet another lawsuit. I am pretty sure every Disney movie has some kind of a copyright or trademark infringing or IP theft lawsuit attached to it. Just a couple of years ago, they had a situation with Zootopia, which I actually kind of side with the guy because he apparently pitched a movie called Zootopia to Disney, and it was shockingly similar to the final product, I guess. But there were some changes. I guess there were some changes, like big changes when they were working on Zootopia, and they had to kind of pull it together at the last minute. I wonder if they did that to skirt some of the accusations that they were stealing. Of course, the most famous Disney alleged copyright theft story ever was Kimba, because Walt wanted to do Kimba and he couldn't get the rights to it, so then we did Simba.
Yeah.
So whatever.
Nothing here, completely coincidental.
Completely coincidental, yeah.
So this one, apparently, it was an animator, Buck Woodall, and he filed a lawsuit. I guess he went after them for their first Moana movie, and they said he couldn't do it because the statute was up. But then they made a second one. And so now he can go after them for that. So it was filed last Friday. He wants 2.5% of Moana's gross revenue, or an estimated $10 billion, whichever. I think it could be one of the two.
Okay. He's asking for a modest sum of,
I know.
$10 billion.
Or 2.5%, your choice. Over time. You can pay him off with $10 billion or just keep paying him.
Oh, yeah.
So apparently he complains that he had a story called Bucky. And he was developing it in 2003.
Okay.
And he had a lot of things like they're in Polynesian villages, teenage protagonists defy their parents on a dangerous voyage to save their home. Those things can be argued as pretty nebulous, right?
Right.
Encountering spiritual animals, mythical beings along the way also can be argued as nebulous because if it goes with the culture.
Right.
But I guess at one point he was talking to this Jenny Marchick, who was at Mandeville Films, who had a first look deal with Disney. And she convinced him to basically give him all kinds of stuff, because she was like, "Oh, we're gonna get this green lit." So he did, and then nothing came of it. And then Moana came out, and apparently there was enough similarities that the judge, had said before that they couldn't on the other one because of the time constraints. But this one, they can move forward. But there were some things in like a whirlpool and some other things that they said it would be very unlikely that both parties would come up with the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Recurring themes of spiritual ancestors manifested as animals, a protagonist whose journey begins with a turtle, a demigod adorned with a giant hook and tattoos, a giant creature hidden within a mountain, plot elements involving a symbolic necklace.
And they also said that there was like a curse. They had to go to Ancient Island. There's a big oceanic whirlpool portal and all this stuff, which, I guess that one you could argue, they've used that before on other things. They're probably going to lose because Disney's going to probably make sure they argue effectively enough that these are things that could be coincidence.
Right.
But do I think it's a coincidence? In my opinion, probably not.
Yeah. So here's what's interesting about it, and I did not know when we talked about it before recording. That went to this other person, director of development or whatever. I remember a story, and I can't remember. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus anyway, but there was a YA graphic novel that was pitched. And the person who pitched went to an agent And then the agent went and got herself a deal and took the graphic novel and turned it into a prose book, but it was literally the same plot.
Yes, I do remember that.
And that does happen sometimes. Sometimes these people are like, hey, because all these people care about, these middlemen or middle women, all they care about is getting their cut, whatever. And they don't care where it comes from. Like you'll learn and we had an agent for a while, you will learn that they don't particularly care which one of their clients gets them their next meal. They're going to go with whatever.
Okay, I'm going to say it like it is. We had an agent before, and the agent, I think, signed us thinking that neon was black, and then found out neon wasn't. But
so that's part of the ongoing joke, right?
This is why I told me I wasn't feminist enough, guys, because I had a girl being happy that the guy she smiled at her.
Yeah, the man who told you weren't feminist.
This person represented other people who were very prominently in the, I am a certain class person. I get check boxes here and there. So what would happen would be, Neon would say about wanting to go after something or have an idea about something, and then one of his other people would get pushed in there instead.
Yes.
There's also times where Neon had contacts that the agent said he wanted to talk to the contacts supposedly to get Neon something, and then turned around and gave it to one of the other clients who had the right check boxes by their name.
Yes.
That happened multiple times. Suffice to say, we were not longer with that agency because it was a lot of crap. I don't think that guy's there either anymore. I hope he got his butt canned.
I don't think he is. I think he
stalled us out on purpose on things. We already had interest on the one story. It was Crimson Red. Already had interest. First Second took a meeting about it just on a pitch we sent them. Okay. We already had the interest.
It's a good book.
Yeah, they almost took it. Yeah. He pussyfooted around and stalled us out for months and ended up pushing other people ahead. And it ended up being a problem. I also can tell you that we have signed a first look, well, not first look, but I guess it was kind of first look, agreement with Disney through other things. And they made us sign papers, basically like if something comes out that's similar to your idea, you have to admit and agree that it's completely coincidental and that, that happens and it's not us taking it. And yes, sometimes it does happen. However, one of our pitches had a certain name and certain dynamics that we had going on. Disney was already producing something with a different name, and it was picked up with a different story and name than what ours was. It wasn't related. However, they turned our thing down. And then amazingly enough, the show gets a new name that's almost exactly like what our name was, and a bunch of story elements that were almost exactly like our story elements were.
Yeah.
But it's completely coincidental, guys.
It's completely coincidental. And apparently talking to an attorney that we had at the time for another matter dealing in and around Disney that has been resolved, this is common. This is actually, again, if you're Disney and you're a huge entertainment company.
And you have lots of money to run you out of money.
Right. And that's how they do it. So it could, I'm saying like, it could even be that some of these elements or whatever is kind of like, hey, we should do a story about, unless they can connect this person to the director of Moana.
It's going to be really hard to prove.
It's going to be hard to prove. And look, they've been doing this for a long time. And they also know too, sometimes, people come up with the same ideas, and that's why a lot of times companies won't take unsolicited pitches or whatever, because they're like, there's a chance that we actually had an idea like this internally, and if you send this to us and then this thing comes out, then you're going to accuse us of stealing it. But when you actually have a paper trail of, this person had a first look deal with Disney, or this person worked with Disney, then that adds a lot more weight.
Right. And then I guess they turned over like storyboards, and they had like some, some animation done on it, and all this other stuff got turned over. So, there's going to be more weight behind that, but it's also going to be kind of hard to prove unless they play it in court and show the documentation and show that it is very similar. Disney also turned over apparently their stuff. But, here's all our notebooks and everything. That doesn't mean that, that being said, doesn't mean that somebody who did steal it, who saw it, didn't present it as their idea and everybody was under the impression it was their idea. Because a lot of times these people in the middle, doesn't mean the higher ups know that they took it. It doesn't always mean that they know. Like we had that Onward situation where they took the van, and they had the van at the event. The woman had a van, and it was like, I guess, a well-known van. And she had an event. They rented it for Pixar and stuff in an event. And then the van ends up in the movie without her permission. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I do. And then that just disappeared.
That would disappear because she got money, I'm sure.
They probably paid her off. I'm sitting here thinking, like, don't worry, guys. AI will be much more efficient at stealing ideas.
Yeah. So do I think Disney does this? Hell yeah. Do I think you're going to be able to catch it and you're going to win? Probably not.
Or they'll just throw them and be like, here's $5 million, shut up. They also, another thing they do too is, and I think we talked about this before, we have so many more subs now than we did when we first started. We were talking about like industry stuff, but I know one comic book creator in particular that had a very Indiana Jones-esque comic featuring a female lead, and it was actually fairly successful in the book trade. And there was all this noise about like, oh my God, it got optioned by Disney. This is great news. It got optioned by Disney. I'm like,
that does not always mean good news.
It got optioned by Disney so they can sit on it, so they can bring Indiana Jones out without direct competition. They're not going to do a damn thing with it.
Yeah, sometimes studios will totally option something so you can't take it someplace else because they know they are doing something that they're afraid might be competition.
Right.
Or they took ideas already, made their own thing. Who knows? But that happens a lot. So when someone gets something optioned, doesn't necessarily mean that the intention is to actually push it through. They're going to tell you it is, but it doesn't mean that that's the case.
Yeah, and a lot of times you'll see the press releases and stuff will come from the agents or whatever. Like, look, we got this thing picked up or whatever. And then it never materializes. They're so...
No, but the agent still got the job done, so it benefits the agent.
Yeah, and the agent got a cut of... Because they give you money. They option something, they give you money.
It's not a whole lot, usually.
It depends. Depends on who you are. But yeah, for comics, it's usually not a whole lot. But they give you some money up front. So the agent gets a cut of that if they broker the deal. So for them, that's an advertisement for their next gig. The next person
look, I got deals. Yes.
I got a deal.
They don't care if it goes through.
Yeah, they don't give a shit. They don't care. They got their money.
So Disney is saying they denied it. They're saying that it was independently created and that it was not inspired by or based in any Wood Dollar's Bucky project, which I learned for the first time after the lawsuit was filed. They said they submitted documentation outlining the origin and development of Moana, story ideas, pitch materials, research, travel journals by the creative team. Here's the thing. You have to have an idea to go out and have travel journals. So I'm not saying they did, but it's also very possible that one person presented the idea, had seen this before.
Yeah.
And that they were pitching ideas to the team, that the team might not have known about it, but they knew they took it from somewhere, and they don't know. All I'm thinking about is, we talked about this before, back in the day, not in the 90s, back when websites weren't super common. Neon had the original shadow binders, okay?
Oh, that's a whole thing.
There was the original shadow binders. He actually built websites, so he knew how to track stuff.
Yes.
And Disney was hitting his site an awful lot. So he's like, well, maybe Disney wants to hire me or something, getting all excited. And then Treasure Planet comes out. And Treasure Planet has a lot of similarities. I'm not saying they took it, but they might have gotten some inspiration from some of the drawings that were posted.
Yeah, the original version of Shadowbinders was
very different.
Almost a completely different story. And it actually was more science fiction-y and more futuristic. But the protagonist then had a 90s bowl cut and a hoverboard. And
Winston was in it.
And Winston's about the only through line. Winston, Sid and Winston. They were the only two that kind of made the cut.
And the True North.
But then some of the designs I had, like the base was actually like a crescent moon type thing, and I had all these like designs and stuff up for this comic. And back then it was like, like I said, it was very uncommon for artists to have their own websites, but I actually was a web developer, and that's mostly what I did by day, was web development. So I had my own site.
It was like a proof of concept.
Yeah, it was proof of concept, and I was talking to Image or whatever back then. It was a whole thing. But like I would get friends comics online, stuff like that, because nobody really could do it. You had to know how to code and stuff.
Literally, Neon was one of the proto web comic people.
Like, we're always too early.
I know. And what kills me is one person, I'm not going to say who, we helped them get their stuff online, and then they took credit as being like, I was one of the inventors of webcomics. It's like, bitch, please, no, you didn't.
Yeah,
you didn't want to put it on there. Neon pushed you to put it on there.
I had to talk him into it. I'm like, eventually, most comics are probably going to be read online. I can do it. It's not that big of a deal because I've done it before. Just let me try it. And for me, it was an experiment too. Like, can I put a long?
You just didn't have a finished thing, and they did.
Yeah.
And then they get credit for being, one of the people who started webcomics, but they did not. It wasn't even what happened.
Use email. He could barely use email.
I know, but he gets credit. And of course, he didn't correct the story either, which is another story.
He got all kinds of traction for that. Like, you're a webcomic pioneer. I'm like,
no, he wasn't.
I had to talk him into it.
But anyway,
twist his arm. Anyway,
this is like stuff that makes us mad. Anyway, But so this art was up there, and you could see, because you could see, like, you know, it's like you can now. Where is the views coming from?
Yeah, but it wasn't like they didn't have all the rules and stuff and regulations they have for tracking. So I had the IP address.
Not just that. Back then we had very few websites, so it had to be. It was easy to figure out. Right. You know, this stuff, because you didn't have like what we have now. Right.
And you know, if you were an artist and you would put your website in like, you know, DMOZ or you'd link to it on like a Lycos or something like that, right? I actually had a hosted site, so it would rank higher. But yeah, so I kept seeing this IP address come up, and I'm like, what the hell is this? Yeah, boom, 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 boom. And I looked into it. I'm like, oh my God, that's
hitting all the art.
Yeah, it was Burbank, and they were there all the time. Like, they were there, and I'm not saying, because I can't defend, I'm sure there's no record now anyway, because it's been a long time. But there were a lot of visits from Burbank back in the day. And weirdly enough, then I wound up working on licensed Disney stuff, you know, a couple of years later.
But then I remember the first time I saw Treasure Planet.
You looked at me
I'd seen your art. I looked at it. I looked at you. I looked at it. I looked at you. I'm like, what the fuck? You know, because I was like, because it was
that's kind of like.
And then you told me. I didn't even know this. And after I was like, that looks like your stuff. And then he told me the story. It's like, well, it's so funny you mentioned that, because I didn't even know about it. But I saw the movie and I had already seen all the art. Yeah. And I was like, wait a minute. And then it was coincidental, but I was also, you know, my early 20s, so I'm like, what? You Plus,
know,
I mean, it wasn't enough. It was different enough that they could successfully argue that they might have taken. That's why I said they took inspiration. I'm not saying they copied it exactly, because they didn't. They changed it, but it was clearly inspired by. And they could argue successfully that they might have been inspired by it, but they didn't steal it. And that would have been true. Well, that would have been true.
I love Treasure Planet, because I'm like, this is like, if I were going to make a movie, I'd probably.
I know, right? Like it was. But our daughter hates it because she knows the story. But
I don't hate it, though. I'm like, this is cool. This is like all the kinds of art I like. Oh,
yeah, I wonder why. But I'm just saying, I mean, they could have successfully argued.
Yeah.
Even if you had wanted to push it then, that they changed it enough and they could have taken inspiration, but you're allowed to take inspiration. So, you know, and that's what we're coming back to this. It's like, now the Kimba one, you're really going to be hard pressed to prove that you didn't steal that one.
Right.
But you named it Simba. But they've been, you know, like the one place even called Zootopia, but they don't think they've won. And what they do is they win. I don't think they did.
No, I don't think you did win. But
they just stall it out in court to run you out of money.
Right. There were, and I have to look into it more. Somebody had an interview with somebody who worked on Zootopia, and they said that there was a lot of last minute changes to it. I mean, the movie actually wound up being really good, ultimately, but I'm wondering if some of those changes weren't instigated by the lawsuit.
The potential
lawsuit be like, okay, you got to change this because, you know, if we change it 25%, it's not the same thing.
I think you would know there's enough similarities, enough story elements that are similar. You know, even if you do change it, I think courts might be like, no, you still copied it. Because if that's the case, you can steal anything from anybody, but as long as you change it some, you can claim it's yours. Yeah. And that's the problem. However, Disney has really good lawyers. Disney has a lot of money, and Disney, even if they know they're in the wrong, they'll do it anyway because they know that they'll just either pay you off or stall you out in court. So a lot of people might just be challenging it just because they're expecting a payoff. Yeah. But anymore, Disney's been stalling people out in court and running them out of money. Now, again, we don't know if this is true, and this is true that they actually took it or not. Knowing what I know and seeing what I've seen, I would not be surprised. But again, it's going to be an uphill battle for this animator.
And like I said, you know, the stuff we had option, you sign when you take the money.
You agree to it.
You agree to it. The paperwork. You read the paperwork, and they're like,
you sign this check, and that means
you take that money. There's a chance that we might be coming up with something like this internally, and
it has nothing to do with you. Wink, wink.
Wink, wink.
You're never just going to change the name of a show that we've already had in the trades listed as one thing, and change different story elements about it, even though in the trades was listed as another thing.
It was cheaper to do it in live action than it was to do it as animated.
Right. And then it's just like, but it's just completely coincidental. I swear to God. Yeah. So, but what we know, we just talk out of our ass and don't know anything about this kind of stuff. So
we don't.
Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up.
Yeah, let's wrap it up. So there we go. I think it'll probably be like, here, take, $10 million and get the hell out of here. And Moana's a cash cow. So please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. We'll talk later.
Bye.